Hey, Jim.
Hey, Steve.
Do you happen to have any Led Zeppelin?
In the store? Yeah, of course.
Do I find it under L or Z?
And greetings once again from two guys talking about records, a vinyl community podcast. My name is Jim. I'm a record store owner.
And I'm Steve, a record collector.
You know what? That question you asked, it sounds funny, but it's really actually true. It's happened here before where people asking, is Led Zeppelin under L or is it under Z?
Well, maybe lead is like when you say Los Lobos is both L, so that doesn't work. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, anyhow, that's going to be our subject this week on the podcast, talking a little bit about how you should, or how we think you should, or how we organize our record collections. Far be it from us to say what you should be doing. It's whatever feels best. But we'll get into that here in just a couple of moments.
I'd just like to say that what I'm going to tell you is how you should be organizing. Do what you want.
Word is law on this. But before we get to that, though, I do have a shout out. We actually got a shout out on another podcast, and I wanted to return said shout out to the Mr. Shark Attack and Lady Starfish podcast. You can find them on Spotify as well. They talked about us last week in their podcast recommendations and got wind of it and wanted to say thank you to them, but also to tell folks to tune into that.
Well, that's fantastic. I did not know that.
Not a record collecting podcast. It's more of a catch-all, whatever they want to talk about, comedy podcast. So husband and wife team.
Yeah.
Mr. Shark Attack is a customer here at our store, comes in occasionally. And Lady Starfish, I have known for a long time. Used to work with her back at the college in another lifetime. So,
all right, wonderful.
But we actually got a shout out. Go figure. But check them out on Spotify, and you can check us out on Spotify. Unless you're listening to us there, then thanks for checking us out on Spotify.
But if you're listening to iHeart, you can still check us out on iHeart too.
You
right?
can. Lots of other places as well. So, hey, before we get into the topic this week, what kind of good pickups did you have?
Kind of a little quiet. I went to the well. We went to the basics, some that I've been missing. I finally found Donnie Iris's Back on the Streets, the one that you could have found in a bargain bin forever, and I never, ever see it. But that Alea song, I mean, it's such a fun album, but you never see it anymore. You can see King Cool. That one's always out there.
Yep.
Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA. When it came out, it was okay. Well, everyone else in the world thought it was great, and I'm going, it wasn't like the college rock we were listening to. But I've finally gotten into it, and yet I don't always see it out there. And I finally am going through, but there's a copy of it. The most interesting was it's called Peru Selvatico, and it's called the Sonic Expedition to the Peruvian Amazon between 72 and 86. And
wow.
Those Peruvians were a crazy bunch, man. They made some great stuff. Now, there's some fantastic Peruvian garage rock that I've picked up. This looks more, it's within the Amazon, and they had all these mining towns and lumber towns, and they were always looking for acts to entertain them. So these acts, were formed because you could make money. And they took music from Colombia, which is Cumbria music. Then they brought in Cuban rhythms, and they added in a few other things. And so it's its own special mix, but it's a great album. It's fun stuff. It's all instrumental. It's a 2 LP set. It came from Analog Africa, which is one of my favorite labels.
We've got some Chilean music buried in the back. I'll have to dig that out for you at some point and see if that floats about too. But
yeah.
Some fun stuff. Quick note on the Donnie Iris. I saw a video pop through on YouTube a month or so ago where he was playing live fairly recently. It was like his birthday celebration. He's a lot older than I thought he would have been, but still kicking it. So
wonderful.
Props to Donnie.
Well, I think a lot of them are a lot older than we think they should be. What do you mean? They can't be old.
Because we are, too.
Yes.
I'm feeling that.
Yeah.
Well, my pickups this week were light, but not just in number, but hefty as far as just some very cool stuff. We had a great visitor at the store, and you've talked about this gentleman often on your YouTube channel,
Yes.
and we've talked about him before. Michael Christensen from Southern Michigan, down in the Detroit area. He has released a new album called The Middle Kingdom Years, which is kind of a compilation of a lot of his earlier stuff, but never been pressed on vinyl. How would you describe? I mean, his hype sticker on the album calls it psychedelic space rock.
It's very ethereal. I think it definitely it's like being on a trip. You know, if you like kind of some of the Grateful Dead stuff, you take that trip. It just flows like that. Very cosmic, very spacey, but it is so relaxing and completely enjoyable. You just put that on, you just lay back, and you know what? It's like you're on a journey with it. Beautiful
And
stuff.
You top it off by him just being such a great guy, too. So
He is top-notch person.
Stopped by the store with an album for me, and we got a couple copies for the store as well. So very happy to, I always love carrying Michigan artists, especially when they're great folks like this and they put out some great stuff. So congrats to Michael on that, and look for his album on Bandcamp as well as his other stuff.
Yep. You've already sold one.
I have, yes.
It's going like hotcakes.
Yes. So the other pickup this week, I don't know where I was as far as not catching these guys earlier. I usually love these types of cover acts that they do their own interpretation of more famous groups. And this is a group called Brownout, and an album that they put out called Brown Sabbath Volume 2. So there was a Volume 1. I missed that one. But Volume 2 came out fairly recently on vinyl, and this stuff is absolutely kick-ass. These guys do Latin-influenced covers of Black Sabbath on this album. They're their own band in their own right, but this particular album is all Black Sabbath tunes done with horns and just kind of a more Latin feel. You got Snowblind, Supernaut, a lot of stuff from Volume 4, by the way. Fairies Wear Boots, going back a little bit further, Electric Funeral, Sweet Leaf, and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, but all of them are just phenomenal versions. I've been really, really infatuated with this album.
Jim had played me some excerpts of YouTube, so you can find them on YouTube. It's just fun. It's just pure fun music, taking that dark Black Sabbath and suddenly giving this kick-ass joy, and it's like really danceable.
Yeah, and then the vocals kick in. They're not too far off from the young Ozzy sound, but different enough not to just be a knockoff.
Yeah, it's great.
We may have to do a what is it about topic down the line somewhere. What is it about Black Sabbath that invites these types of covers? So, but onward, we go to the topic this week, and this was prompted by you were mentioning that you ran out of room, and you had to do something to help your burgeoning collection stay tamed, and reshelving them with extra cubes.
Most people listening have probably had this problem happen to them once in a while as you look, and it just keeps stacking on the floor and everywhere else, and then the spouse is looking at you and what are you doing? So yes, I had to bring in a couple more units. I had to move a whole bookcase out and put it into another room so I could put in these records. But now I've decided this is as far as I'm going to go. I will not expand, though I did a video on this just this last week, and people said, well, you got the closet you can redo. A couple suggested get a smaller desk because it's in my office. So get a smaller desk and you can get a whole nother set of cubes. So a lot of people have been very helpful.
Oh, yeah. Well, you could also make a desk out of cubes if you needed to. So good luck with that, because I've said that before, too. This is my shelving units here. This is the size of the collection. And if something goes in, something comes out. And I held true to that for a little while, but then I realized, you know what? This is a record store. I've got some empty shelving in the back. So now when something goes in my main shelves, it goes out and goes on my back shelf. So I'm not having very much luck confining the size of the collection either, but that's the
theoretically, you're sticking with it. If something goes in there, something comes out. You just really never specified where that other album was going to go. So, yeah.
Don't tell either of our wives about this, please. We'll be all right. So how do you organize? And that's the question we wanted to talk about today, because there's a few different ways to look at this. And there's some nifty sound clips. If we get a chance to, I'll drop them in from the movie High Fidelity. Obviously, we've gone to that well before. But there's a really neat scene where he is reorganizing his collection. It's kind of a cathartic method to deal with his problems. I want to feel better about myself, so I'm going to pull all my records off the shelf and reorganize them autobiographically in the case of High Fidelity. But that got me thinking, how do other people do this? I mean, in the store, and we talked about this with what makes a good record store as far as how you organize, but personally, it comes down to taste. And I want to specify there's no real right way or wrong way to do this. It's whatever is easiest for you. But what works for me may not work best for you.
Yeah, I love organizing, and I would be one if I'm down. I'll just go reorganize those records, and then I feel good because I'm touching and you're looking at them all. When I had 2 rooms and I had a very large collection, I had taken mine into subgenres. I mean, it was you country, western, obviously your funk, your soul. Funk and soul were different, but then it'd be punk. Then it might be more new wave. I mean, it went really subgenre. But I had the room, and I had 12,000 albums and CDs. So to me, it helped me decide when I want something, I know what genre I want to go look at. Now I don't go quite to that extent anymore. It's always alphabetical for me. I like alphabetical. The is not a T to start with. The Ramones is an R. I just want to clarify this. But I still go by genre, but just broader. So I'll have an African genre. I got a Brazilian genre. Okay, so maybe that's a little specific. But there's jazz, there's soul and funk together now, and rock, soundtracks, country western, blues. I guess those are the genres I put it into. But I'm the kind that I want to play a blues album. So I want to go to my blues section and thumb through. I just don't know what I want to play.
For listeners who may be new to listening to us or who have not been familiar with your YouTube channel, we probably should back up a little bit and talk about what happened to you to necessitate you going from this 12,000 large collection with lots and lots of space down to the one single room, your office, and that was the flood of 2020.
Yeah, it's anniversary about right now.
Up.
It is, so we're going to have a party and everything. We're going to put water in the basement. Yes, there was a big flood. Everything in the basement, it was 7 feet of water in the basement, and so records floated down there for 2 days. A sealed record will not keep out water. This is just an FYI for everyone, just so you know. Sealed records, still water gets into them. So it all wiped out, but I started over. But as I started over, my whole point is I'm getting older. What do I need that many records for? Because I'm not going to be able to listen to them all. So I've limited my space, but it keeps growing.
As we've talked, it happens. It happens to the best of us.
Yes, it does.
I'm with you on the alphabetization, and to some extent on the genres. My space in the store is separated by genre because that is how we do stuff here. But personally speaking, I really only separate out jazz, soundtracks, and then everything else. And then except I do need to take that back. I've got another full separate shelving unit with nothing but my Michigan collection. So I break that out, and that's kind of a floating collection where sometimes, I'll have them in the main collection. Sometimes I'll leave them in the Michigan collection. But otherwise, I'm with you on the alphabetization. It sticks in there. Now, the whole idea of the word the before one is something that discogs had to iron out with the way that they alphabetize things. And I want to stress here, too, that you can alphabetize the normal way where you take like a David Bowie and put them under B for Bowie, David, or the Ramones under R for Ramones and the. But discogs did have that problem early on where the letter or where the word the was kind of a stickler and a lot of the stuff fell under the. And then they have this other thing in discogs called an ANV, alternative name version or something like that, where you take a group like the Rolling Stones that have been around forever. Some of their albums, it's the Rolling Stones. Some of it, it's just Rolling Stones. And so the word the comes and goes across their vast discography. So they had to do something to kind of group all of them together. But discogs, for their credit, the word "the" is dropped and then everything is alphabetized. But I'm not too fond of the way that they'll do that in the listings with the last name of a solo artist. So if you're going to look for a Bowie in your discogs, you got to go to D.
Yeah, I have been to some record stores where they alphabetize by first name. So for a Bowie, you get to David. You know how many Davids there are that make music? And you're thumbing, it's like hours you seem trying to find the one thing you want. A last name is a little more, it's different. It's easier to break apart. But when you put it by first name, oh my God, it can go on forever on some of these. It's insane, but that's how they do it. That's how they like it. It's your store or it's your collection. If you're happy, great.
Now, where do you stand on solo artists and their larger groups? In the store, I will take, for example, a group like the Beatles. And for ease of finding things, I will group all of the solo Beatles stuff with the greater Beatles catalog. And that's just because maybe a customer will not think to look under the M's for a Paul McCartney or the L's for a Lennon or an R for a Ringo or an S. I forget on that one. So I group all that stuff together. But I found that in my personal collection, I tend to do the same thing, but not for all solo artists. And it's a little odd in the way that I organize things. But where would you think about falling into that for ease of use of finding?
See, Lennon does not want to have McCartney next to him. He's rolling over in his grave if he thinks Paul McCartney's right there next to me. And I respect that of him. So I do separate out the solo artists by their last name and put them wherever. I do understand that though, and you're right, there's a lot of record stores I go to, and that's how here's Beatles and here's the other acts that go with it.
The related.
Yes, the related. Myself, it's just, I know that last name, that's what I'm looking for, and that's where I go.
You got a group like the Beatles where the solo work is almost as important as their group effort. But then we mentioned the Stones, you take to that, there are some solo Stones albums out there, but they never had the impact. So I think in that case, that's an easy go-to. There's only a couple of different Keith Richards or Mick Jagger solo albums and even a Bill Wyman. Why not put them with the Stones?
Well, if you're selling, it makes good sense if you have a store because, okay, I'm buying a Stones album. Oh, they have some of the solo stuff and I want to do it. I mean, that just makes great sense in a record store. Me personally, in my collection, it doesn't. I want to buy the last name, but for a store, yeah, you should.
Now, for me, in the personal collection, I got to admit, I put the Bob Mould stuff next to the Husker Du, and because that's just sometimes I'll think, you're shaking your head at me. The other big one for me is Joe Walsh. Now, he was a member of the Eagles, a member of the James Gang, but I think his solo career outweighed those. I'm going to take some heat on that, I think. So I put the Joe Walsh stuff in W, whether it's James Gang or not, and then the Eagles stay with the Eagles.
So you have a confusing collection that, and really, I think what's going to happen here is I'm breaking in, and some night I'm just coming in. I'm going to organize the thing right. So you're going to be much happier because, and again, that'll just be my happy space because I'm organizing and alphabetizing a collection. I'm going, oh, this is the best.
You might make Kim happy doing that too, so she doesn't say, "Where is this?"
I also organize and alphabetize my books. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Now, how about holding records? I see this as really kind of three ways to do this. You have a shelving unit, which could be either traditional shelves that are built or the cubes like you use. Crates, anything from milk crates to wooden crates or the plastic crates, or bins.
Think back to your college or high school years. You have concrete blocks, some thick wood, and you go and you find milk crates at, the places that sell milk. You go to the back and you steal their milk crates and you have that. I had that. Oh, man, I bet 30 years I had that set up. You just shove them into the milk crates. You need more, you just stack the milk crates up. But now I really like, the bins, the Kallax. Is that how you say it? I don't know.
I think.
And from IKEA. IKEA, we just give us money. We just gave you a shout out. So To me, they look nice. That's the really nice part. And, like I have a higher, my ceiling's pretty good, so I can take an 8, a unit that goes up by 4, then add up another unit on top and goes right to the ceiling. It looks great. It's beautiful. It's clean. It's nice, white, shiny, or you can get the other colors depending on what you want. For me, I like it. I was in when I lived in Minnesota, I actually had someone come in and make custom cabinets for me. We redid the basement, and I said, okay, here I drew out kind of these custom cabinets with CDs and albums. Did that. When we sold the house, whoever bought it go, what the hell's all this? But oh well.
They weren't collectors. Hey, quick side note on the whole milk crate thing, and I remember reading about this a long time back. In the 60s and 70s, as vinyl was really taking off with rock and roll, for those that don't know, you used to get milk delivered, whether it be to stores or to your home, in crates that held bottles of milk. Well, the companies that did that found out that there was too many of the crates were being stolen by record collectors because they'd set them out outside the stores or set them out on porches, and the record collectors would say these fit perfectly. They'd rip them off. So they changed the size of milk crates proper so that they wouldn't fit. And I still see some of these come into the store with people bringing in records to sell or trade, and they're the older style milk crates with the albums wedged in diagonally because they didn't fit anymore. But they did that. They resized milk crates specifically because there were being too many stolen to use as record containment devices.
Well, now there's a fun fact, and yes, you're right. Everyone was looking and go, milk crates. Yeah. Eventually, stores carried the right size. I worked for Kmart, and man, I bought a lot of those, and they had the right size for CDs too. And you would just make these walls of crates with all that.
And when we started the store, I picked up these blue plastic crates that were sized at about 13 inches. They'll hold 50 to 60 records comfortably, but it's plastic and they wear and they break over time. But I see the need for crates, but for those that have a smaller collection, that's probably a good way to go because they can be mobile. They can be moved out of a living room into a different room if need be for entertaining or the like, or carried to a party if you're that type of person carrying your records around for that, where shelving really does get to be a lot more permanent.
Yeah. On YouTube, there's, if you just put up a record room tour, you can get 1 billion videos. And there are some really cool ones. People have made bins like you would find in a store, so the albums are facing out and you flip through them. It's just very neat on how you do it. If you have the room, that's good because that does take up a lot of room. For me, I'm in the smallest room in the house, which is also my office. And there's 2 windows, so it's how high can I go? And I use the tops to put my stereo on, so I don't have a stereo rack. It fits though, and it looks cool.
Now the whole idea with the bins, and this is one thing we do here at our store, and I take a little bit of heat from my wife Kim on this, is let's say you take a shelf and you've got your records alphabetized A to Z, left to right, like a book. You read left to right. You start on the left and you go through the alphabet. In our bins, I mimic that. Let's say you pull a handful out of the shelf, drop them into the bin. That then means that you start at the back of the bin with the A's and come forward. Most record stores don't do that. It drives Kim insane because, and a lot of people when they come in, it throws them for a loop because they're used to seeing A at the start and then you work your way backwards through the alphabet where we go differently, and I always explain, well, picture them on a shelf. You're not going right to left on a shelf. This is just a shelf in a bin. It drives them nuts.
After 4 to 5 years, I'm still very confused by it. I mean, you have your reasoning. It's your store. You can do it. And I go, okay, now, which way do I go on this?
You just think backwards.
Yes, okay.
But it just takes getting used to for any customer. We joked earlier about finding Led Zeppelin under L or Z, and yes, seriously, that has happened here. But there's other things too. And I'm not going to fault on people who are getting into this because I want to encourage this. We're not going to make fun of people for saying vinyls when they're coming in. Same thing, Molly Hatchet. I'm not familiar with her. Is that any good? Okay, we're going to learn about this. So that goes under M for Molly because it's not Hatchet, Molly.
That's a good one. You're right. It would be going. And some people don't even bother to organize, which is fine. They put it in. They're perfectly happy. I'll reach in. I'll get whatever I pull out, and that's fine. The organization is not their deal. I like it organized. It makes me feel good. I look at it. I go, yeah, all right. I can find it. Then all of a sudden I find something out of place. It's like, well, I probably have some kind of psychological issues here, but...
Well, I think it could be a representation of your personality too. Do you tend to be that type of very meticulous person who wants things exactly the way they are, or is it just whatever, man? Let me move this load of clothes off the top of the records and pick whatever. So shelves, bins, crates, whatever you work, just don't pile them on the floor, please.
Yeah.
I mean, flat, especially.
Yes. Yep. Everyone seems to have stacks, even in my room. There's but they're not flat. They're there for future videos or whatever. New stuff I bought that I'm still listening to before I file them away. But boy, I'm at the point now where I put up 12 bins, and I thought I would have all this extra room. And when I get done, I go, I don't see where I opened up any. I do not know how that worked, where it seems like I gained zero. Huh. I can't figure it out. So now it's looking, and this is where part of that, comes to deciding what am I not going to listen to. And now it's a matter of pulling things to say, I really don't need to have this to make room for things I really want, like Peruvian music.
Peruvian music or Chilean, however you want to work in that. When people put their shelves up, and this is just little side notes, and from my years of seeing records coming in various states, always look out for things like direct sunlight, a window that comes in that is western or eastern facing that will take some heat in the summertime, or even heating vents. You want to be careful not to put things too close to those.
Yeah. I have two windows, and someone asked me, go, oh man, doesn't that hurt your windows? I go, not really, because one's from the east and the other's to the north. And I rarely get much sunlight in. I got a big tree with the one from the east. So for me, it's not a problem. But yeah, if it goes the other way. And I do have a couple heating vents. I've had to try to move my rack. So first off, I don't want to freeze or sweat to death up there. But yeah, you just have to jockey things around because it is tight.
Yeah. And it's not something that's going to hurt them in the short run. Same thing with piling them up. As much as I want to dissuade that from happening, in the short run, it's not going to hurt them. Just like being in the sun is not going to. But over the course of years, if it's in the same spot next to a heat vent or in the same spot where it's leaning a little bit next to a window, it could harm the records down the line.
And when you think about that with harming records, also you have to look at some of these special ones that come out. The Rolling Stone zipper one is a famous one. If it's in there tight, that zipper's digging into something. I personally take a piece of cardboard and put it there so it digs into that cardboard.
It's a great way to do it too, and you don't think about it until you're looking at that other Stones record and say, why is there a divot in the back of that? Well, thank you, Mr. Warhol, for designing such a cool record, but wrecking the other one on the other side of it. That's a good point in there. Where do you stand on dividers, whether they're identifying just the letter of the alphabet you're in or sometimes even artists? Record stores do that. I personally don't for the personal collection, but I know a lot of people do.
I've seen a lot of collections with dividers. I don't, because I organized it so I pretty much know where the lettering's at and what cube's what. Also, because it's in a cube, I like to take albums, generally maybe one from that cube that has artwork I like, and I front face that out. So when I look at my collection, I have these, the artwork of some of my favorite albums to look at. Because let's face it, if they're just standing up there, sideways, how exciting is that? But art is made to be looked at. So I switch that around, or I have, very special ones that are valuable, that make me happy, and I put that out front. But it kind of corresponds with what's under, behind it. So that helps me know where to go.
It also makes some great visuals for your videos on your channel, too, by the way. I need to point that out. The other notion then would be protecting the vinyl. We've talked about a little bit about how to do this, but the poly outer sleeves, the 3 mil or 4 mil, they take up space, believe it or not, especially if you're looking at, a couple hundred records tossed in there, those millimeters add up.
Yeah.
And that will actually cut down your space. Is it worth it to protect the cover if you're giving up a little bit of space?
Yes, it is. The last thing you want is a bunch of ring wear. Yeah, it hurts the value, though you may not be selling. That might not be your interest, which most people, it's not their interest to sell the records. I have them here. But you want the artwork to look great. And so those little sleeves are important. Now, some people get really bent out of shape. It's on the shrink wrap. Yeah. It's got to come off or it has to stay on. I personally leave it on, which to some is like a sin, and I'm going to record hell for it. But I tell you, I have had albums in shrink wrap for 40 years and nothing's ever happened. If it's on tight, you can see if it's on tight, yes, it needs to come off because it's going to warp it. But if that cover's not being kind of bent by the shrink wrap, it's fine. And to me, it's an extra layer of protection. But, I would be visiting with people. Oh, you got to take it off. So I'd go on and rip off a bunch of it and go, well, then someone said, well, why'd you do that? So then I'd leave it on. I mean, it's been the most confusing thing in my life for the last 50 years. And I finally just said, you know what? It's not coming off anymore. And
my rule of thumb for shrink is if there's a cool hype sticker. Sometimes I'll leave it on. Sometimes I'll actually cut the hype sticker off and store it inside. That's the geek side. My story with the poly sleeves, though, and where they could become very beneficial for you. Long time ago, we're talking early 90s, Kim and I were renting a house on the lake, on Lake Superior, outside of Marquette. And it was an older cottage, and it had an older furnace. And one day, the furnace just decided to, let's just say, expel. It didn't explode. It didn't do anything super harmful. It just decided it was going to go bleh and kick out soot out of every single vent in the house. My records were all in poly sleeves at the time, and they were fine. We had to wash everything, had to throw a bunch of stuff out, and the only thing I really had to worry about was the exposed spines on the records to clean. And I was so thankful that I did have poly on them because I did have some bins, and there were some front-facing ones that would have been completely toasted or soot-covered had they not been put in sleeves.
If your records get submerged underwater, though, it goes into those poly sleeves and just sits in there the whole time.
I need to tell you okay, folks, here's your trigger warning for this very gross story on buying records. Several years ago, when after we started the store, I got a call from a gentleman in a neighboring city. Said, I'm going to come. I've got these records. He found them in an apartment from someone who had passed, and they were going to pitch them. He says, are they worth anything? I remember it was a Father's Day, June, and it was 90 degrees out. And when I went to look at these, he had them in a garage where it was also 90 some odd degrees, but they were in poly sleeves. But this particular person, the collector, had stored them with the opening up instead of in the spine. And I know that's a matter of preference. But this particular collector also had a cat. So the cat had, let's just say, expelled urine on the tops of the record crates where the openings of the poly sleeves were. And as you mentioned, the poly sleeves will hold water in this case, or in this case, liquid. It was horrible. I looked at them and said, you're kidding me. You didn't even bother draining them. Oh, these are worth a fortune. I'm like, they are not. These are gross. They need to be pitched. There's no saving them. Why did you call me?
These are worth. Yeah, some cat really likes them a lot. They smell great. Oh my God! I mean, he's just there, not going. God, these things smell terrible.
I offered him a little bit of money for the batch that wasn't affected like that. He turned me down, and then about a month later, he called back and said, "I'm willing to take that offer." I said, "Were they still sitting outside?" And I'm like, "Yeah, nope, absolutely not."
Yeah,
wow. So. Organizing your records, you do it what makes you feel good. Or reorganizing your records, do it often if it makes you feel good.
Yes, that's right. It is about, it's your own personal preference. It's like anything, I in college, I worked in the library for 4 years, so I really got into the whole, If I could do Dewey Decimal System on it, I probably would. But it is about what you like and what makes you happy. And for some, an organized collection really makes you happy. Others, you could care less, but that's fine. It's your music. It's all about enjoying it.
Find your level of obsessive versus compulsive and go from there.
That's right.
Well, what do you folks think? Please comment either on our YouTube channel where you see this, or there are some comments available on the Podbean app, I believe, as well. But we'd love to hear from you and hear how you organize. And again, do you break it down into just minuscule subgenres, or are you like me and you kind of group stuff together, except for soundtracks?
Except for soundtrack, which I separate. I don't know. I think I'm going to go home and maybe just do a little reorganizing again, just for kicks. I want to take my soundtracks and alphabetize them. I have not done that yet.
One thing we didn't get into, if you really want to burrow down into this, is you can organize alphabetically, of course, but then within the alphabetization, you go chronologically. So you start with your first Stones records through the latest. I don't go that far. I should.
Some people do. No, I don't go that far either. There has to be a point where you said, that's it. No more. And that I'm not going to do, because putting them away is just a pain in the... Oh, God, what year is this? Yes.
Remember when they came out. All right, well, that will do it for this week's Two Guys Talking About Records and Two Guys Talking About Organizing and Caring for Your Records. My name's Jim. I'm a record store owner. Thank you for being here.
My name's Steve, and I'm a record collector, and you can hire me to come and organize your records.
I'll let you take a look at this one later.
All right.
Let's see.